And I often ask, why do you want to be a doula? Oh, I want to have people have a peaceful death. And I'll go, well, good luck with that, because some people don't.
Yeah.
If you've got an attachment to that, you're going to be imposing your view upon the person. The thing about doulaing is my client is the expert. The family is the expert, not me. So what I'm there to do is to listen and draw out from them, what are their preferences? Let's help you navigate what feels the right thing to you, because you're the expert in your life, not me. And as far as my tick list goes, is it legal? Is it safe? And is it possible? And if it ticks those 3 boxes, I'm in.
Welcome to Don't Be Caught Dead, a podcast encouraging open conversations about dying and the death of a loved one. I'm your host, Catherine Ashton, founder of Critical Info, and I'm helping to bring your stories of death back to life. Because while you may not be ready to die, at least you can be prepared. Don't Be Caught Dead acknowledges the lands of the Kulin Nations and recognises their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and First Nation peoples around the globe. Helen Callanan is a practicing end-of-life doula and the founder, managing director and lead educator of Preparing the Way. Originally trained in traditional Chinese medicine and Reiki, Helen has almost 40 years of experience working with the aging, very ill and dying. Preparing the Way delivers holistic end-of-life and doula education across Australia and New Zealand. Preparing the Way is also very proud to have designed and to deliver the world's first nationally accredited Certificate 4 in end-of-life doula services. The long-term caring and death experiences of her parents, family, friends and many clients, alongside her passion for education that transforms, led Helen to establish Preparing the Way in 2014 and brings her wealth of knowledge to hundreds of doulas, clients and their families and those close to them. Helen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Catherine. Thrilled to be here.
Helen, you've designed and deliver the world's first nationally accredited Certificate 4 in end-of-life doula services. Can you tell us how this came about?
Yeah, well, we're very proud of it, number one. And it's come about with a lot of blood, sweat and tears and a lot of work from a lot of people and a lot of industry consultation. And it's been a labour of love, I can honestly say that. And you know, early on when I created Preparing the Way, you know, we were having conversations way back then about doula was often seen back then as a very grassroots, sort of bit left of centre, for some people a bit woo-woo, la-la, a bit out there. And so in a lot of conventional care settings, end-of-life doulas were a bit marginalised and were not necessarily taken seriously, or it's a bit like how birth doulas used to be. You know, they weren't allowed in the birthing suites, but now midwives actually actively encourage them. So we, at Preparing the Way, the stats are that around 80% of people die either in an aged care facility or in a hospital. Now, my mission and our mission at Preparing the Way is all people, and that's capital A, capital L, capital L, all people empowered with choice at end of life, and all people having access to a doula. So what I went, you know what, the way the conventional care system works is, generally speaking, you need a piece of paper to say that you are skilled, or to say that you have the knowledge and the performance criteria, that you understand the laws, that you know about occupational health and safety and infection control, and you know those basic things that are important. And they're public health concepts. And if we want to work in that and provide doula services in those environments, then it makes sense that there's a piece of paper to get in the door. And I want to just say, Catherine, you know, we're proud of the Cert 4, and it's an amazing training, and we've got our first people coming through now, and we've just started our second one, and our third one will start in August. But I really want to state up front, you do not need the Cert 4 to be a truly amazing doula. There are a lot of people, end-of-life doulas out there, who've had little training, and they're doing it organically because it is a role of being of service. So I just want to state that up front. We talk to people when people come and say, oh, I'm interested in the Cert 4. We look at people, what are your goals, actually? Where do you see yourself? What calls to you? Because you don't need the Cert 4 to be a great doula, as I said. But if you want to work in the conventional care settings, like some people come to us and they're just like, I just want to be with our elders. I just want to care for our elders. Well, these days, if you don't have a piece of paper, you can't get into an aged care facility. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to me, it's about means to an end. It's about creating, and also the other thing I was very committed to, is creating a professional role that doula is, because it'll always be done by people in the world. We're all going to be a doula at some point or another for people in our lives, whether it's our family or a friend or someone in our community. We're all going to be doulas. But there are people that are particularly trained and are able to, that have a deep level of knowledge and a deep level of experience that can actually then very gently provide the support to a person and or their people close as they're navigating this whole, multi-stage journey. And I'll speak about the 10 stages shortly. But, in terms of how it came about, long answer, cut it out if you want. In terms of how it came about, I started doing some research on what it actually took to have a course be accredited. And I'm telling you, it's a lot. And the hoops and the things you've got to jump through to get it across the line, to have it signed off as valid, and it's a massive undertaking. And we started off by doing a lot of research. We researched to people who had already done our non-accredited training. If this was available, what would you want? And would you be interested? We talked to industry stakeholders. So we went around a lot of different organizations. We had 30 or 40 different stakeholders in the industry, in the end-of-life space, range of people, doctors, aged care facilities, doulas, nurses, a whole bunch of people, asking their experience. We did a lot of demographic research and put together, a case for it. And then we created the subjects, and we began then to build those. And as I said, we've just started our second one. We just put our second one in the water literally a week and a half ago. And, we've changed. I think we're on version 3 already, even though we're only starting our second one, because we're learning all the time. We made this up from nothing, basically, inside the guidelines, of course. We deliver it in partnership with a registered training organisation that our program is on their scope, and that's called Essential Skills Training and Recruitment. And they're an award-winning RTO based out of Newcastle in New South Wales. And they have so championed us and worked with us to have this be the calibre of program that it is. We're very proud of it. And we're learning all the time. I say to people, we haven't been on a learning curve. We've been on a learning spiral, squealing, hanging off the sides. It just it's spinning out of control. But you know what? We're very committed, and we will fulfil our mission. That's what we're here for.
And tell me, what are some of those learnings that you've had along the way?
Oh, goodness gracious me. Well, we have both accredited and non-accredited training at Preparing the Way. And we've been delivering the non-accredited training now for 10 years. And that's where most people that have done our training have gone on to be doulas. That's where they've started. And when we did the first intake, we had people start that program. We did an interview process. We had people start that program. Around half had done our non-accredited training, the foundation workshop, and then the 4-day intensive, and about half hadn't. And what we found was the half that had not, all bar one of them, withdrew from the program, because we're talking about an 18-month commitment. We're talking about a significant financial investment. we're talking about a significant investment of time and energy and focus. It's something like, I don't think I'm making this up, but there's somewhere between 50 and 60 assessments, right? That's a lot of work, right? So people started it, and when we interviewed people as they were leaving, the majority of them were saying, you know what, it's not what I thought. So in other words, they didn't have a real relationship with who and what doula is and who and what doula does, and also the opportunity to go, oh, well, here's doula, like which if you'd done the foundation workshop and the 4-day intensive, which the others had, they were like, oh, this is doula. I want this. This is where I belong. I want to invest in this. One woman who did the training sold her house so that she could devote her time to it. And she's the first person to get through. That was her level of commitment.
Yeah, that's
She's the first person to finish all of her assessments. And we're just waiting on the nod from the RTO that, you know, all of her assessments have been validated, which is a very rigorous process. And then we'll be giving her piece of paper. So that's the first person. And so do you get what I'm saying? It's like this work is a calling for most people, Catherine. They really feel called to this in their heart. This is a work of heart, of spirit, of service. It's not a doing. It's not a clinical, you know, thing. It's a very much of heart. And so that was one of the big things, is to make sure before people come in that they understand doula and that this really is an authentic choice for them rather than waste their time and money, you know. So that was one. Another one was too that when we're writing training, as I said, we're on version 3 right now. When we first wrote it, I think we probably pitched it a bit too high in terms of it was more diploma level than Cert 4. And so the ASQA has these levels. And so we probably pitched it a bit high. And so we've actually ended up being able to, again, with the RTO's input and validation and support, to simplify it, which is a great blessing, right? Always to make things simpler. And it makes it more accessible. We've also trained how we're delivering it. I think the other...
Helen, just before you go on, ASQA, what's ASQA?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thank you. So ASQA, which stands for the Australian Skills Quality Authority, they are the governing body of all things accredited, nationally accredited training, whatever level that it is.
Yeah.
And so ASQA, they set all of the rules. They have all of these parameters. And so we then we designed the training, developed the training, and that includes all of the assessments and the assessment marking guides and the learner guides, which is like the manual that they get for each unit, all of that. And then all of that we have 15 units, and all of that gets submitted to ASQA, and they go through it all, and you pay a registration fee to do that. Then they come back and they go, you know, here's the areas that are not compliant. So then you go back and you have, I think we had a 4 or 6 week period to get everything done. Otherwise, we'd have to start all over again. So it's very rigorous, very, very rigorous. Then finally, we got it all signed off. So then once that happened, then we go to a registered training organisation, because basically preparing the way, we designed, we developed, and we deliver. So we train and assess. But our RTO, or registered training organisation, they are the ones who validate the training and the assessments, and then they are the ones who actually give the piece of paper saying, here is your qualification, your Cert 4. We don't do that. That's the difference between certified training and accredited training.
Yeah,
See, our non-accredited training is certified. We're saying you have successfully completed this, but there's no assessments. And bottom line is, any organisation can certify their own training. But accreditation is by an independent party. And so that's our RTO, and we have a third-party agreement with our RTO, and they basically, we give it to them and we say, here it is. We say it's ready. They then literally go through it with a fine-tooth comb and audit everything, and then they'll come back and say, yes, now that's ticked. Yeah.
Thanks for explaining that process, Helen. And you were saying another challenge that you had was about the training and the level.
Yeah, so the level it was pitched at, so I've created like a Cert 2, is pitched at this level, and a Cert 3 and 4, and like it goes up in diploma and degree, all of that, right? So we when we first wrote it, we probably pitched it a bit high. It was more like diploma level. And so the RTO were very helpful in helping us work out where we had done that and bringing it back and having it be more at that level that it was designed, should be designed at. And so that's made it simpler. We've also changed some of our delivery style. Also, the other thing to bear in mind, Catherine, that we have to think about is that this is adult education. So it's very different to school. It's very different to holding people's hand. Now, we bring doula to it. So, for example, some of the units in the Cert 4 are what we call core units. In other words, they're actually units from other major training packages. So, for example, community health, right? And we might have taken one of those units, and there's 11 of those. 4 of the units are what we call enterprise units, which are unique. So they're the preparing the way, and we also work closely with Natural Grace, holistic funerals. So the 2 of the enterprise units are designed particularly deeply with Natural Grace because they are to do with home-based after death care and also funeral care and in a holistic model. So that's that. But the other core units, the other 11, are taken from other training packages, but every one of them we have contextualized to doula. So it might have been, let's say we picked a unit like palliative care. Now that's pitched to be delivered to people learning palliative care. So maybe AINs or enrolled nurses or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But that's a clinical medical role. Doula is non-clinical, non-medical. So every one of those units, we re-pitch them, bringing the contextualization to doula so that people are getting trained. Well, how does doula operate in this space?
Yeah,
right? Still learning the same content so that they understand. And how does doula relate to this versus nurse or whatever? Yeah.
And how long did that process take? Because it sounds very rigorous.
It took us 2 years with people working on it full time.
So when you think that you started preparing the way in 2014, this process took 2 years, and we had a little thing called COVID in amongst.
Well, do you know
that.
what? When COVID started in 20, I'll never forget it. March 2020, we had a choice to make at Preparing the Way, and that was either shut the doors because all of the training up until then, the non-accredited training, had all been delivered face-to-face, except for the foundation workshop one day I occasionally did on Skype back then.
Yeah.
So it was either pivot to Zoom or shut the doors. And I went, well, we've done too much. We just need to keep going. I was terrified about putting all of this training, particularly the 4-day on Zoom. The 4 days is a very deep transformational program. And I was really worried about that. But do you know what? It's actually worked amazingly, and in fact has had a very positive outcome. And we keep the numbers small, so that makes a difference. I lead that. We've got another trainer co-leads that with me, parts of it, and that training now has become so much even stronger because of course there's breakout rooms. You can still do that work in smaller groups.
Yeah,
we can still watch videos. We can do all of that. And what we found is that sometimes, and I had a woman say this to me once, Helen, I'm so glad it was on Zoom. And I said, tell me why you say that. I've been worried about that. And she said, because one of the things they do, people have to have done the foundation workshop as a prerequisite so that everyone starts the 4-day with the same language and the same knowledge base, right? And they they have to do some projects in between the foundation workshop and the 4-day. And one of those projects is to write the story up close and personal of a death in their life. And on day 1, everyone shares their stories of death. So you can imagine the space that opens up. It's
Yeah.
very raw, very tender, very powerful. And so this woman shared the story of the death of her baby. And of course, it was very powerful and very real and raw for her. She said, Helen, she said, I'm so glad that I was at home in my own home. And she said that I know if I had been in a room full of people I just met that morning, I wouldn't have gone where I went with my story. But that I could, on the breaks, turn my camera off and turn my mic off and sit back and take care of me and have a break. She said it made all the difference.
Wow, that's interesting.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't it? Another woman said, Helen, and this woman is someone who's done a lot of corporate training and a lot of, at a high level. She said, Helen, I've traveled all over the world to do training. And you come home with your suitcase and your manuals, and then you go, okay, how do I now integrate this into my life, back into the office? How do I do that now? Bringing this rare experience from across the sea or whatever, another town. How do I do that? She said, what's great, Helen, she said, is I did this at home. My home office now has got my doula map up on there, and it's got this up there. And she said, doula is alive for me in my home already from the day I finished the course. So it's got pros and cons, I know some people still want to do, and we are starting to do a little weeny bit of face-to-face training, sort of as much as I can get out to do it. But, I think that it's that pivot time, when we pivoted, that's when we started working on the Cert 4, because here's what happened, Catherine. If you remember, Job Seeker was out, but people were at home. So people had some extra money. People had extra time. So their courses just filled, because people who'd been wanting to do this for ages but couldn't get 4 days, all of a sudden were like, oh, my God, my opportunity's here. I'm jumping in. Wow. So all of a sudden, and also every time I used to fly away to do a 4-day training, that was 7 days out of my week. So all of a sudden, I'm just going into the office and leaving. I'm not traveling. I'm not packing my 323-kilo suitcases. I'm not setting up, an apartment, and I'm not doing all the shopping and the catering and that, right? I was just walking to the screen and leaving. So all of a sudden, I had time, and we had the resource. So I went, I can hire a team, because I was a one-girl show up until then. I was a one-girl show. So I was able to hire a team. So I went, right, now we're on the Cert 4. Wow. So that's what we did, and we started.
So it sounds like it was a total period of growth for you then. Talking openly about death and grief can sometimes be triggering. If you find you need support, please reach out to our support services and the bereavement organisations listed on our resource hub. All links are in the show notes of this episode.
Yes, and I can honestly say, Catherine, nothing could have prepared me for how much it has taken. It has taken not only those 2 years, we have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. It's taken everything. And I don't regret it one little bit. Would I do it again? Yeah, possibly not. But at the same time, it now exists. And, honestly, I limped into the end of last year. I really did. I remember saying to my co-owner, Catherine, who's also my bestie, I banged my fist on the desk one night and I said, that's it. I said, if preparing the way and our work isn't flourishing by the end of 2024, I'm going to go and drive Ubers. I'm not going to shut the doors, but because I was like, how much more will this take? But you know what? I took some time off over Christmas, and I don't know, somehow something shifted, and I've got my mojo back and I'm on fire more than damn ever. And
that's very good to hear. But
it is.
Is that the thing? Is that like, do you need to just set aside that time where you just say, okay, I just need some time out?
100%. Well, we all do. right? We all do. And I think particularly with the world as complex as it is right now, if you think about it, Catherine, there's no stability anywhere. There's no stability in our climate. There's no stability in our financial markets. There's no stability in real estate. There's no stability in between the worlds and other countries. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no stability. And also there's so much fallout from mental health and social well-being from COVID. There's so many challenges for so many right now. Domestic violence is at an all-time high. Suicide is at an all-time high. There's so much, our youth are really struggling. There's so many challenges that people have right now, interest rates, the whole thing. So to me, I don't think self-care or taking time out or doing things that support our well-being has ever been more important than it is now. It's a very complex world. And then you add to that what can often be a very fearful and stressful thing, like someone in our family that we love or someone close to us that's got a diagnosis or advancing in age or living with dementia or dying or dead suddenly. There's just so much to carry for all of us. Mm.
And what are the things that have worked for you when you take that time out? Is it a break? Is it meditation? Is it reading? What do you do personally?
Personally, first and foremost, I have a very good therapist. Cannot do it without a really great therapist. I have a very trauma-informed therapist. So that is something that I avail myself of regularly. I love to float in float tanks.
Yeah, wow.
So that for me is like that sensory deprivation where I can just go in. I'm a meditator as well. I meditate.
I've never tried the float tanks.
Oh, Catherine.
Is it salt water?
Yeah, it's like, Epsom salts.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And there's like hundreds of pounds of Epsom salts. The water's like about this deep, right? About maybe a foot deep. And you just bob to the surface. You're like a cork.
Yeah, wow.
And here's what I suggest you do. When anyone's trying it for new, I say book at least 2 sessions, because the first session you're like, okay, what's happening? Where do I get out? Can I get out? Will it be all right? Will I be all right? Your mind's just going, right?
Yeah.
But once you've done it the first time, it's like, okay, I know what the routine is now. Great. And you get in and you'll probably have a better float. Third one, even better. Okay. So I try and float probably every 2 weeks. I'm doing it weekly at the moment because I've got a fair bit going on.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So that's one of my things. The other thing for me is silence. So obviously meditation, but also sometimes just staring out the window is reading, just taking time. I love trees. I grew up in the bush. So trees for me are like my friends. So sometimes just going for and just sitting, listening to the wind in the trees. Oh my God, that for me is like ointment. The other thing is for me, I have a very strong, powerful team around me. So that's my team that I work with. It's also, I live with my sister who's very grounded and very grounding for me. I have my spiritual teacher and my mentors. I've got my colleagues that I work with, Libby Maloney from Natural Grace, Julie Fletcher from Doula Connections, Catherine, who's my bestie and co-owner. So I've got this amazing group around me that help me stay focused and centered, yeah. And then on other nights, there's a glass of wine. That helps too. And sometimes chocolate even.
And is that something you teach in the course, the importance of self-care with being a doula?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yes. Look, the truth is, Catherine, in my personal opinion, you cannot do this work in a sustainable way without putting a strong focus on self-care. Because the thing is that you can't do this work in a silo, is another thing I say. You can't do this work alone. And people often say, well, really, what are you doing? It's not like physical labor. No, it's more emotional and spiritual labor, this work. And it's about holding space. That's a term that Heather Plett speaks a lot about, and I love to acknowledge her for that because she's written an amazing book called The Art of Holding Space, one I recommend anyone who's in a service industry of any description or should read. Holding space, that we are constantly in the face of things that can be emotionally challenging for people. We might be in the middle of argy-bargy in family relationships. We might be in the middle of dealing with something that's a very traumatic event for people. There's a lot of grief. And so we really have to be able to sustain ourselves, and we have to have boundaries. And that's a word that I couldn't even spell. And the reason I know how important self-care is because I've burned out, and I know what it is, and I know what causes it for me. I think it's different for different people. But so I think, and that's why I recommend, I just wish everybody at birth was given a really great therapist and a Reiki practitioner at birth, right? Because Reiki is another thing that's part of myself. I do Reiki on myself every single day. And so, that's another thing for me. I take a lot of supplements. There's a lot of different things. This is critical in this work, self-care. It's not an option, I say. It's a necessity. Yeah. If you don't want to burn out, that is.
Yeah, yeah. And what other qualities do you think that a doula should have, if they're looking at this work? What sort of personal qualities?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And we talk about qualities and traits in our training. And look, I think some of the things that I would say are most critical in my experience, and I would have 5-10 years ago, I would have said differently. But my work now, and I think, and this is one of the things, Catherine, if I can just, if you like, preempt the answer by saying this, is that there's nowhere to get in this work. That as I work alongside families and I share experiences with families or individuals, as I teach, as I share stories with other doulas and people, students, that I'm changing all the time. I'm growing all the time. And so there's nowhere to get to. And who I am today as a doula is very different. So what I would say today about what are the primary qualities that I look for when I'm looking for a doula or I'm recommending a doula to someone else is their capacity to be present, their capacity to come from their heart and meet people where they are, that to be able to be and to be able to listening, oh my God, listening to listen, not listening to talk next, right? True listening. And also, I think one of the biggest qualities and traits is to be able to develop a skill at giving up attachment to outcome. Because if we go in there, and as I have done, how do I know this? Because I've done it. If we go in there with a Mrs. Fix-It attitude, like there is something wrong here and I'm here to fix it, bom, bom, wrong answer will get you into all sorts of strife, right? Because the thing to me is this, I used to be a real Mrs. Fix-It and I was very skilled at it. I would go in, tell me, everything's going, I would go whoosh, 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 flick, fix. And then I'd swan out the door feeling very self-satisfied, done a great job. But guess what? I actually left them no more empowered. They actually became more dependent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I'm there to actually support people to go, you know what, you've got this. You can do this. This is not rocket science, what we're doing here. This is about caring and responding. And we talk at Preparing the Way a lot about being response able, being able to respond to what's in front of you, not what your agenda is. You might have made an appointment to go and visit someone today to make their funeral plan, but you get there and they've just got the shits, or they're just upset, or they're not feeling well. If we can't meet them where they are in the moment, we're going to just walk all over that because we're paddling to our agenda. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah, and I think that the big thing is nothing to fix here. One of the things about doula is being, as I said, not being attached to the outcome. Because I said to, and I often ask this of a doula, so tell me, why do you want to be a doula? Oh, I want to have people have a peaceful death. And I'll go, well, good luck with that. Because some people don't.
Yeah.
And if you've got an attachment to that, you're going to be in all sorts of trouble, and you're going to be imposing your view upon the person. See, the thing about doulaing is you are the expert in your life. My client is the expert. The family is the expert, not me. So what I'm there to do is to ask questions and listen and draw out from them, what are their preferences? Do they know what their options are? Let's look at your options. Let's help you navigate what feels the right thing to you, because you're the expert in your life, not me. And as far as my tick list goes, is it legal? Is it safe? And is it possible? And if it ticks those 3 boxes, I'm in. No agenda.
It sounds like it's one of the very few occupations where you can actually say it is selfless.
On a good day. A good day. Because the truth is, Catherine, we're human damn beings, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, one of the things I talk about in the training and is that, I have people come to me and go, Helen, I'm thinking about giving up chemotherapy. What do you think? Now, I'm a human being. I am going to have an opinion, Catherine. And I'm going to believe I'm right about that opinion too, what's more, because I'm a human being. However, I zip my lip. And my standard response is this: well, let's look at your options. If you do stop chemotherapy, there's going to be pros and cons to that. Let's look at those. If we don't know what they are, let's go find them out. If you don't stop chemotherapy, there's pros and cons there too. Let's look at those. Now, out of all those options, what feels the right thing to you right now? On the understanding you can change your mind tomorrow, because you're in charge. We talk at Preparing the Way about giving people back the 3 C's: choice, capacity, and control, and facilitating a journey.
And you mentioned just briefly earlier on, you were talking about there's 10 stages.
Yeah. So Natural Grace, who I mentioned before, created a model that we call the 10 stages of life. And the model talks about that, and I'll go through the 10 stages and then I'll give you an analogy around it. So the first stage is a person is living well, right? But we say, as an end-of-life doula, I work with people in every one of these 10 stages, right? So the first one is a person's living well. They're not particularly aged, there's no diagnosis, but they're looking to put their plans in place. Maybe they're going overseas, maybe they have elderly parents. So I work with a doula in that stage, right? I have clients that everything's fine. They're just doing planning. Then maybe there's a diagnosis enters the picture, or they're advancing in age. So then I'm working with people in that section, right? But then maybe if there's a diagnosis, maybe they start having treatment, or they're living with their illness or aging. I'm working with people there. But then their treatment may stop working, or they're advancing in their illness or aging to a point where they need to move into palliative care. I work with people there. Then the last stage of palliative care is called active dying. And that is a recognized set of symptoms and signs that show that a person is now very close and death is imminent. And then they die. I work with people there. But then that's only halfway down. Then there is home-based and family-led after-death care, vigil, ceremony. What are we doing after their death? And then we might be doing funeral planning. And then we might have a memorial or a celebration or a funeral. I'm working with people there. Then we actually are doing the final stage of returning the body to the elements. I work with people there. And then we circle back around, this circle of life we talk about. We circle back around to the living. Now supporting the living, the people left behind when someone has left their world. So we can work with people there. So in those 10 stages, and I want you to think about this to me is the key point, that end-of-life doula is the only professional role that I know of where there is absolute continuity of care. So I can start with someone at diagnosis, and I'm right there all the way through that entire journey, right through the end to when they've died, being returned to the elements, and now I'm supporting the family. You think about it, because let's say I noticed a lump. I would go to my GP, and my GP would send me off for diagnostics. Maybe I'd have scans and x-rays and bloods and biopsies. I've got a diagnostic team. Then they come back to the GP with a diagnosis. That team drop off. But then I'm sent for treatment. Maybe I'm having surgery, chemo, radio, immunotherapy, complementary, whatever I'm doing. But I've got a treatment team. But then after a period of time, my treatment stops working. I'm now entering palliative care. The treatment team drop off. Now I've got a brand new team, palliative care team now. And they're great, critical to my well-being. Then I move through active dying, but then I die. Palliative care team will leave. Now I've got a brand new team again. My family do anyway, called a funeral team. But then the funeral happens and then they leave. And then my family is left with a hole where I used to be. And they're navigating this new normal with, what do we do now? How do we do this? What do we do? End-of-life doula can accompany someone every step of that journey. And that's unique.
And what seems to be interesting also in that model that you were just discussing is that the client changes also during that process. So it is actually the person who is well and planning, and then the person who is dying, and then they die. But then it transforms to supporting the family. So it actually has sort of like two roles. Is that right?
It is. And the actual, and it's not like you're supporting one, then the other. Generally speaking, in the majority of cases, you're simultaneously supporting both because they're all going through different things. So sometimes I work with simply the client and they're navigating their own journey, or they're estranged from family, or they don't have family. So sometimes I'm working solely with the client. Sometimes I work solely with the family and I never meet the person with the diagnosis, right? Because the family are going, and could you imagine, some people are like, I don't want someone poking around at my end of life. Let's get it. But the family want the support to know that they're doing and they've got their options, sort of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But then after that, we also work with the family after death as well, as you say. But that was an accurate and insightful statement, Catherine, about that the person aging or living with the diagnosis and ultimately dying, there's stages, they're going through stages, and there's constant change. And this is it, where we've really got to be able to be adaptable and flexible as an end-of-life doula, because today's solution can become tomorrow's problem, so you've just got to be able to be in the flow and adapt and be very flexible,
Now, can you tell me about last year that you received some funding from the New South Wales government to provide the accredited training in an aged care facility? Can you tell me a little bit about that program?
Yes, that was amazing.
Obviously, it's never happened before, I'm assuming.
No, it hasn't. And we've even had an even bigger development since then. So what happened was through our RTO, Essential Skills Training and Recruitment, and they specialise in community-centred sort of care training. That's what they do, community-based care and individual support and all that. And so they work a lot with aged care facilities who are putting their staff through training. So they set up this opportunity with Baptist Care based in Newcastle. And the government funded 16 of the Baptist Care staff to go through 2 of the accredited units. And it was called a skill set. And one of them was our enterprise unit at Preparing the Way on active dying. So training the staff in how to be more death comfortable, more death confident, so that they could actually be interacting with the residents and or the families of people as they were actively dying and support them, both parties. But then the other unit was about palliative care. Now, we did one unit and then we took a 2-week break and we did the second unit. The feedback after the first unit, when they came back to do the second one, was, and to see, and these 16 staff, there was 4 of them were RNs, but all of the rest were floor staff, so general support care workers, right? And I think we had an activities person.
4 registered nurses?
No, 4 registered nurses, of the 16.
Oh, okay. Yep.
All the rest were like general care staff, like care support staff. And I think there was an activities person, and one of them was a manager as well. So And to hear the floor staff who on day one introduced themselves like, oh, I'm just a care support worker. I'm like, are you kidding? No, just about that. You're the person at the coalface, right? So to see these care support workers come back going, it worked. I was really able to talk to someone and it made a difference for them and their family. And I was so lit up and so excited. And so it was so effective that Baptist Care then contacted the RTO and said, we want to put this out through all of our New South Wales and ACT properties. Wow. However, of course, then the government funding changed, as funding does. So that hasn't happened at this point, but I know it's something that they wanted. But what then happened in December is that this is a really big deal. So the New South Wales government have what they call a smart and skilled list. And smart and skilled list is professions across every area of work, professions that they say are needed in the community, in the workspace, in the workforce, and they actually provide subsidy funding towards people doing that training to build the skill sets out in the community, in the workforce. So they have actually put our Cert 4 in end-of-life doula services on the smart and skilled list.
Wow.
So people living in New South Wales and or working in New South Wales, and there's certain criteria and eligibility, but they can now receive the majority of the tuition of the course funded by the New South Wales government. And we just had, it's absolutely huge. The government, this is an extraordinary endorsement and validation of the power of this role, because you think about it, there's some stats that came out internationally, and Professor Alan Keller here actually shared them in a video. He talks about the 95% and the 5% rule, and this is really key. So he says that only 5% of the time a person is aging, dying, or grieving. Only 5% of the time are they in front of a doctor or a nurse. 90% of the time, they are either alone with their family, friends, community, maybe groups they're part of, the TV, the internet, or the dog. 95% of the time. So end-of-life doula works exclusively in that 95%. We don't do the medical and clinical. We work alongside that. But we are about helping people become death comfortable, death confident, and feeling, because, you know, we outsourced death about 100 years ago, right? We sent it to aged care facilities and funeral directors and hospices and things. Now, nothing wrong with that, right? But it had an impact and a cost. And the cost was we lost our confidence and our capacity to take care of our aging, our dying, our dead, and our grieving. We've got to, as Libby Maloney from Natural Grace says, we've got to reverse pioneer. We've got to bring back the past like our grandparents and great-grandparents used to do. We've got to do that, yeah.
And have the conversations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the thing.
And when a doula has completed one of your courses, and look, it's amazing that you've managed to get on that list and that training can be subsidised. But when one of your doulas have completed their training, what do they look at going into a care facility, or do they look at running their own business? What are we sort of seeing? How are they finding employment afterwards?
Well, this is a changing thing, because the thing to remember is this is an emerging industry. And now with the Cert 4, there's a lot more interest in this role. And that was part of us doing this, right? So doulas are faced with a few things. Firstly, the majority of doulas who go on and actually take this work up, they actually do. They either start their own practice or their own small business. And we give them, in the training, we give them support and resources about how to go about that. But as anyone who started their own business will tell you, that's a big thing. You know, most businesses fail in the first year. And so, you know, that's a big thing. But there are doulas now out there, very successful, that are now getting employed through NDIS packaging. and also my aged care packaging. And I've been paid through both of those packaging, right? There are also doulas out there that are doing it, in their local communities. Doulas are out there doing death cafes. And one of the things we talk about in the 4-day intensive, and in the Cert 4, people can choose. There's actually one of the modules is about doing a business plan and creating your business, right? So that's the Cert 4. But in the non-accredited training, in the 4-day, we do work around this. How do you talk about what you do? Where do you promote yourself? How do you do that? How do you get yourself out there? Because as I say to the doulas, what we have to confront is you have to get known in your communities and your world as the go-to deaf person. How do you do that? You can't do that sitting at home behind the door. You've got to be out there. You've got to be talking. And as you say, Catherine, sharing the conversation, talking to people. We've got one of our doulas shared the other day, which I love, and other doulas are taking it up. She got herself a badge made with her name on it and says end of life doula. Anytime she walks out of the house, she puts it on because it's a conversation starter. What's that?
Yeah.
Another conversation. Because, as Julie Fletcher said from Doula Connections, she said, Helen, until doula becomes as well known as nurse, we've got a big job ahead of us. Because we have to, that's why talking about doula, and why I'm always so grateful to be able to come on things like your podcast, to be able to share about doula, because we have to be able to show people and tell people, here is what is available for you and your family. You don't have to do this alone. There are supports out there to give you the confidence to do this so that when it's all over, you can honestly put your hand on your heart and go, you know what? We did a really good job. We gave them the send-off they wanted. We took care of them at home the way they wanted, because that doulaing has to go, and people have to go back into their homes to die. There just aren't enough beds out there, and we can help people do that safely.
And what do you think some of the significant challenges that families face when they, a loved one does die?
The reason I'm pausing is because there's so much that happens up to that time. So I'm like, where do I go with this? I would say one of the biggest things that I see is our fear of grief and our culture, particularly in the West, our culture of she'll be right, I'm fine. It's been 3 months. Surely you're starting to move over it now. We are uneducated around grief. Grief is a gift. Grief is an extraordinary, beautiful, awful gift. And it hurts like hell. And it's messy often. And sometimes we can't even function. And that's normal and organic and healthy. And the more we can embrace our grief, the more powerful and healing our bereavement can be. And when it's been a primary relationship, the books say, someone is newly bereaved for 2 years. But I tell you what, I've seen 3, 4, 5 when it's a big relationship. So I think grieving, I think that's one of the difficult things. I think another difficult thing is that the adjustment to life that was not of their choosing. So we can often fight change, and this thing has happened and our person's been taken from us. It's like the word bereavement is like to rob, right? It comes from to rob. So it's like we've been violated in some way.
Yeah, right.
And I think, that so as in our bereavement and our grief, we often go inward. Mourning, grieving is like the internalization of the feeling that we have. Mourning is when we externalize that. So when we go to a funeral, when we talk about our person, when we share about them, when we grieve, when, like that, there's visit the things. That's externalizing the grief, giving it voice, giving it room to be. And I think that to me is one of the most powerful things to do we are often frightened of people's grief. We often feel uncomfortable in the face of someone we care about who's deeply grieving. We want it to go away. We want to soothe them and pat them rather than say, no, howl at the moon, get it out of your body. I will listen to you. And, what I tend to do with someone is to say, tell me the time they pissed you off the most. Tell me your favorite holiday you had. Tell me what you loved. Tell me what you miss the most. Do you get what I'm saying? Talk to them about their person. They haven't, people say, oh, I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to remind them. They haven't forgotten they're dead, let me tell you, right? And so by giving people the room, to talk about their person, I wish we could have, that's another thing we should get at birth, grief classes,
Yeah, it should be taught at school, that's
right?
For sure.
How to be with a grieving person and what a grieving person needs. And, we so often say, let me know if there's anything they do. That person can hardly even think, let alone know what they need or want. And the last thing they can do sometimes is ask for something, so it's...
So given that, Helen, if you are someone who is, because there's always that awkwardness at funerals and things like that people don't know what to say. In your experience, what would you recommend people say or don't say in those sort of scenarios?
Well, I think, we so commonly say, I'm so sorry. And I've heard people say, God, I wish people would stop bloody saying that. They haven't done anything. The person died. So I think it's about, sometimes we trot out these things, but sometimes to say to someone, I can only imagine what this is like for you. Tell me, what are you finding the hardest? Like, talk to them like you care, right? Yeah. Talk to them. Also too, like, I'm going to be going shopping on Monday. How about I drop by and I'll grab a list? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like doing something active, saying, and it's really okay to say, you know what? And I've done this myself a number of times. I don't even know what to say to you right now, but please just know my heart's with you, and it's better to say that. That's more authentic and truthful. And it's okay not to know. We try and cover up our ineffectiveness. It's okay to say, I feel I'm flailing at the moment. I don't even know how to help you. I want to, but please just know I'm here and I care. Like give them the gift of your honesty.
And vulnerability, I suppose.
And too. Vulnerability, because it opens the door for them to be vulnerable, Catherine. And I remember Sunday saying to a young person, I can only imagine this is pretty shit. And he goes, oh, it's so shit. I said, what's the shittiest? And letting him talk.
Yeah.
And then shut up. Don't try to fix it. The thing is, and this is that thing about giving up attachment to outcome, when we try and fix things, we're implying something is broken. Grieving is normal, organic, healthy. No one's broken. Even when a person is unable to breathe and they're screaming their grief, wailing, they're not broken. They're expressing their grief in their way. Just giving them the space to do that. That's sometimes the most healing thing there is to do, is to get that off pain, that ball of energy out of your body and out of your mouth is a gift to give someone, to be able to hold space for them and let them be where they are. Sometimes people are enraged. I remember a woman said to me once, her husband died suddenly, unexpectedly, while away on a holiday. She said, I'm so angry with him. She said, if he wasn't dead, I'd bloody kill him. I said, what are you angriest about? Well, he left me with all this mess and I just let it go. Do you get what I'm saying? Rather than, oh, there, Like, let people have their responses. It's healthy. It's organic, Yeah. I think another thing too, you said about what not to say. Oh gosh, one of the things that is one of my pet struggles is when it's around the death of a child, and people say very silly things sometimes, like, "Oh, don't worry, you'll have another one." Person had a twin die. Well, at least you've got one. Like, please, people, come on. Better off saying nothing than those sort of platitudes. Or when someone aged has died, well, they had a good innings, like they deserve to die now. Come on. So it's just about language is really critical. Language is really critical. Yeah.
We know of one story where someone described someone as, "Oh, well, we lost, the father," and the poor woman suffered from dementia and said, "Well, where is he?"
Right.
And that just sets up for more explanation and confusion. And
yeah, absolutely. And another thing is telling the children they've gone to sleep, telling children their grandpa's gone to sleep, he's having a long sleep. No, the kids become frightened of going to sleep.
Yeah, of course.
Tell them the truth. Children, please tell children the truth. The reason there's so many messed up adults around death and dying is because they were messed up as children by adults thinking they needed to protect them. Think about it. Children are organically curious.
Yeah.
I see them. They'll be around a deceased person. They're coming to visit their person. They're doing vigil and they'll be touching and going, "Why is she cold?"
Yeah.
Right?
And children see everything too.
They do. And they know when we're being weird.
Yeah. They are very good detectors.
They are very good detectives. And, and I want to just say this, that in my opinion, there is no age too young for a child to be in the presence of a sick person, a dying person, a dead person, or at a funeral. No age too young. It is a normal part of life. In the West, I often talk about, Catherine, in the West, we live like it's life versus death. But here's the truth of it. Death isn't the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. And birth and death are parts of a life. You can't be born and not die. The sum doesn't add up, right?
That's true.
So, so it's really about, we talk at Preparing the Way about the circle of life. We're focusing on life here. And on that 10 stages, death is about number 6. It's not the end of anything. This whole journey is only halfway through for most of the people still in the journey. And who knows, the deceased person probably on another journey too in some other realm. Who knows? Not going to go there. But do you know what I'm saying? Like there's so much more to this. And if we're willing to allow the vulnerability and the experience, it's a beautiful thing to be a part of, even when it's messy, because it's real. There's nothing more authentic and truthful.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough for being with us today, Helen. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Have the conversations. Talk to your people. Talk about what you want, what your preferences are. We don't always get everything we want. One of the things again, back to language that I struggle with is this term trying to have a good death. We're going to have a good death because that implies there's bad death. Consider there's just death. And what are your preferences for your death? And what can you put in place now to have that done? Because it's a gift you'll give your family. They'll never be able to say thank you for it, but it is a gift you'll give them. Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. It's been amazing to talk to you. Loved it.
That's a really beautiful thought to end on. Thank you so much, Helen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Don't Be Caught Dead, brought to you by Critical Info. If you liked the episode, learnt something new, or were touched by a story you heard, we'd love for you to let us know. Send us an email, even tell your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. If you can spare a few moments, please rate and review us as it helps other people to find the show. Are you dying to know more? Stay up to date with Don't Be Caught Dead by signing up to our newsletter and follow us on social media. Head to don'tbecaught.dead.com for more information and loads of resources.